Okay, thanks, Erin, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. We have a couple of great presenters here today who are interested in sharing how they've gotten their programs off the ground in different parts of the United States. So let's see, with that, I'll just give you a quick introduction. Let's see if I can advance my slides. So if you are just joining us and you're new to Nature's Notebook and phenology, just a quick overview of what's phenology. It is the recurring plant and animal life cycle stages like leafing and flowering, and also having to do with emergence of insects and migration of birds. The study of the seasonal changes and their timing and relationship to weather and climate. And phenology is a great tool to use for teaching people about the natural world, and it's also something that is really useful for researchers who are interested in studying climate change, because those life cycle events are very sensitive to what's happening in the environment around them. A little bit about the USA National Phenology Network. Our organization is created and run by the U.S. Geological Survey, and we're partnered with the University of Arizona. Our goal was to create a standardized phenology data set for people to use in multiple types of research. And in doing that, we wanted to make the data not only able to be input, but also taken out of the database, so studying can happen either at the local level or at the national level. And as the education coordinator, I like to encourage people of all ages and backgrounds to observe and record phenology, because I think it's such a key thing that people can do to really engage with their place and the environment around them. We have our program that's called Nature's Notebook. It's a citizen science program and a professional science program. And this is the interface that we use on the web and also with the mobile apps so that people can collect observations and submit them to the phenology database. And we have a lot of tools on our website, if you haven't seen that already, including visualization tools and ways to download the data where once you put it in, you can get it out for teaching and research. And if you're just thinking about starting a local project at your site, we have a number of resources on our Nature's Notebook page. If you go to the home page and then click on the drop-down box that you'll see that says for groups, there's a number of selections there. This is the first page you'll come to, and it tells you all about how to start a local project. And again, it's a great tool for answering some of the questions that you might have about your environment around you. And the data that you submit and the participants submit is available to researchers who are interested in studying those things through time. So today we have three groups, three presenters from different parts of the United States. And just to give you a quick overview of where they are, and then I'll turn it over to each one of them and they can tell you a lot more about their project. The first one we're going to hear from is our Central Arizona Phenology Trail. It's here in Arizona, north of Phoenix. And this is their landing page that you're welcome to explore when you have time after the webinar. And Edessa Carr is the presenter for that. She's the organizer and presenter for that group. The second group we have today is the New York Phenology Project, and this is a picture of their website and also the link to their website. We have Carissa Battle presenting for them. She is the person who is collating and organizing the groups that are there in New York. So if you're anywhere near New York, this might be something that you want to check out. And we have a group in Maine. Signs of the Seasons is another phenology program where they are recruiting volunteers actively, and Beth Bisson is presenting for them today. So with that, if we have time, I will also show you a local elementary school project that we have here in Tucson. This is a picture of a project that they did there. So if we have time at the end, I'll go over that. If not, I can just give you the website and the information. That's another cool way that people are using Nature's Notebook. So I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Edessa.
Thanks, Lorianne. Yeah, this is Edessa. I retired in October of last year, and I became aware of the fact that that Tucson had a phenology trail group, and so I thought, wouldn't that be fun to do that around here? And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we went about starting up our group, our Central Arizona Phenology Trail. The first thing I did was think about all the local groups that are focused on the natural world, and I'll just say that I've been an outdoor educator for many years, and a lot of what we've struggled with over the years is how to engage people in the out of doors, how to bring opportunities to them. And we all know we're spending a lot more time indoors, and we just need to get out there and realize what a fascinating world we have at our fingertips. So the first thing I did was I asked these groups about partnering on this, and I did this via email. I told them about the Tucson Phenology Trail System, and then just said, you know, are you interested? And without, nobody hesitated. They just said, yes, let's do it. So for us, it was these groups, Highland Center for Natural History. They provide educational opportunities in the out of doors to children as well as adults. The Community Nature Center is a small preserve that actually predated the Highland Center for Natural History, and so they're focused on bringing people into a natural setting and learning about their local environment. Prescott Creek's Watson Woods, that's a riparian restoration project that has been ongoing and engaging local citizens for quite a few years. Prescott College with their Natural History Institute, and then the Walnut Creek Center for Education and Research, which is a partnership between NAU, Prescott College, Yavapai College, and then we engaged also the Native Plant Society, since many of the people that are engaged in those with these various groups are also members of the Native Plant Society. We knew that that would be a great resource for us to have their expertise. So as I said, we communicated with these key partners via email. I certainly have asked what the preferred way of communicating is. I want to make sure that, you know, we're able to all talk together, and everybody agreed that email was by far the best way to go. One of the things that we wanted to do, we are in the central highlands of Arizona, so unlike Tucson, which is in the Sonoran Desert, much lower elevation than we are, and unlike the plateau, where the Grand Canyon is on the Colorado Plateau, we're in this intermediary zone that is mountainous highlands, the highlands of central Arizona. And many of the plants that we have in our area were not in the National Phenology Network's database. So that was the first thing that we did, was to request that some of the plants that we wanted to monitor were in NPN's database. We held 2 workshops, one on the just a general overview of phenology, and then the second one was how to set up Nature's Notebook accounts for each site. So the second workshop was really geared more towards the administrators of each of the particular trails that we were going to establish. And then we recruited our volunteers from the workshop participants, again using email to communicate. So it was time to establish our trails. We had to decide on a route, select the species and individuals that we would be monitoring along each trail. And I know this sounds pretty straightforward when you see it just printed out like this, but you know, when you get out on your site, you know, figuring out a trail that wasn't going to be too long, and we also using with Lorianne's guidance and the literature that Nature Notebook provides, we realized that it's one of the mistakes that's often made is to try to monitor too many individual species. So I think for each site we selected 7 to 10 species, and then we tagged roughly 3 individuals of each of those species, so that we could capture micro niches within that particular habitat. We tagged the individuals with flags first. We went out there with orange flags and just pretty much were figuring out the spacing between the plants, the flow of the trail. Also, we wanted to have the species close to the trail so that people wouldn't be walking off trail to find their plants. We didn't want the impact, but we also wanted them to be able to find the plants easily. And then we attached temporary plant ID signs like this one that had the Nature's Notebook logo on them. We realized that after we've been out on the trail a few times with groups that maybe having them be a bright color is easier for those that are going to be monitoring later on to find the plants. We wanted to make it very easy for the volunteers to be able to find these species and be motivated to get out there without a lot of undue headache. And then right now we do have one of our trails has permanent signs on it, but the others we still have the plants marked with these temporary signs because we're very much still in the learning mode. We want to make sure that, well, and before we go to the permanent signs, we've got everything just the way we want it. We have some maps that we produced, and mostly they're just hand-drawn maps, but these are kind of nice to have at the beginning of the trail to help the volunteers that are going to monitor these species to realize that they're on the right track and they're not missing a plant along the trail. And I keep mentioning that we are monitoring plant species. In time, we'd like to also add animal species to our list of what we're monitoring. But at this point, it's only plants, and I think that's a good starting place. What we'd like to do is engage some scientists that are in the local area and ask them about those critical relationships of who is dependent on these plants for food sources, for habitat needs, and then kind of fine-tune our list of animals that we would be monitoring so that that information informs us about how the two go hand in hand. The plant species, if they're doing well, then those animals that are dependent on them might be doing well too. We identified an administrator for each of the site, and formerly NPN staff had to authorize these administrators. That's not the case as I understand it now. I work as a volunteer, and I'm sort of the driving force behind this group, so I can actually set up an administrator for each site. And we can have co-administrators as well. So my aim is to eventually not be doing all the administrative duties. We'll have somebody that would be at each of the sites that would actually do most of that work, which really should be pretty minimal. Each administrator could then generate on their observation deck a list of plant species in the order that they are encountered on the trail. And I have to say that the Nature's Notebook website is so user-friendly. Yeah, once we had put in our plants in the order that they were found on the trail, those automatically synchronize with the Nature's Notebook app. And so, and also the data collection sheets for each site can also be generated from the observation deck. So it's also very easy to do. And then it's a matter of getting out on the trails. We took small groups out to learn our species phenophases and to become familiar recording our observations using Nature's Notebook app. And you know what was interesting is that we had a lot of very seasoned botanists who were out on the trail with us looking at these plants in a very different way than they were used to looking at them, and noticing things that they had never really noticed before. So even for them, it was a very exciting thing to realize, wow, I'm learning a lot doing this. Um, and then always appreciate your volunteers, and communicating with them is key. And we're planning to continue to engage them not only by getting out on the trails with them to monitor, but to also have monthly get-togethers, probably in the out-of-door setting, with to get out with somebody who has a particular area of expertise and continue to give them an opportunity for continuing their education, because that's what most of our volunteers have said. You know, we just love learning more, and they're very excited about being able to participate in a big project like this that has where they can contribute as citizen scientists to this much bigger effort and learn in the process. So thank you, and good luck with whatever project you're going to embark on, or those, it sounds like a lot of you are already doing some great things out there.
Great, thanks, Edessa. That's wonderful. I think your project is a really great example. One of the things you said to me when you first got in touch with me was you were looking for a way to kind of connect all of the groups that you knew of in your area around a project, because everyone sort of has a similar mission, and you were interested in finding a way that you could collaborate with them. So I think that's a great example of how that worked out for you. So nice job. Okay, next up we will hear from Carissa Battle, and I'll make her the presenter now, and she's going to share with us some information about her New York phenology project. Okay. There we go.
All right, everyone can see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Can you hear me? And you can hear me?
Indeed.
Fabulous. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Carissa Battle. And first I just wanted to say for those of you who are thinking about starting a partner site, that I commend you. I think it's a great service. I've seen a lot of really interesting and unique community engagement coming from this model. So thanks to NPN for offering it and supporting it, and for those of you who are motivated to make something happen. I'll give you a little snapshot of how we got started. So I was a graduate student at a PhD student at Portland State University back in 2010, and co-created a partner site with NPN to get started. We called it Portland Bud Watch. And it was really interesting to watch how right away all sorts of things started to happen. So we ended up having high school students get involved, wanting to help start their own site. I focused on an academic research project using the trail or the partner site to measure accuracy rates of observers. And a college professor started to use the trail, and we co-developed labs to use with that are still ongoing with the university. So it was a really kind of fast start, and realized that there was a lot of community potential. So when I took a job in New York a couple of years later, I thought that this would be a really great way to engage a lot of the organizations in New York. So I started a 501c3 called Community Greenways Collaborative, which is focused on catalyzing network initiatives focused on research and education. And the first thing that we did Well, first I'll tell you the sort of motivation for it stemming from what I learned in, oops, sorry, hang on one second. I'm just trying to, can you see my screen okay? I've got something blocking it.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, great. So what I really realized in terms of starting the project in New York was that I was really intrigued by all of this different types of community engagement that I'd seen in Portland, Oregon. I thought New York could really benefit from a full-blown army of citizen community scientists in New York. There weren't very many, there weren't a lot of data sets that I could find, at least at first, that had baseline data for a lot of the species in New York. Plant-pollinator relationships was something that, you know, I could see was sort of an up-and-coming research topic, and, you know, having a really clear urbanization gradient in New York from New York City up to the Catskills, that's where I live right now, just seemed like a really great way to establish robust data sets and look at plant-pollinator synchronization. It was an opportunity to build new curriculum and resources. Of course, the focus on STEM and science climate literacy. I also had a strong interest in sort of science-nature self relationships. I'll talk about that in a little bit, about the sort of mindfulness around monitoring phenology and ecological observation, which is a pretty interesting topic, I think, for a lot of the people that do this type of work. And then sort of an experiment into replicable networks. Can you create a site that then can create other sites? In other words, can you get something started at one location and then have it be a self-replicable network across the state or across the region? You know, this was just one project that I was hoping to start and manage. So the idea was never to have it be something that I would have to, you know, manage and run long term, but that the network basically, in a way, kind of establishes itself, or at least proliferates on its own. And so a lot of these motivations to get this project started are very similar motivations that when I've checked in with the partner sites that have established a project, and a lot of these are the kind of things that they cite as their own motivations to start their own partner site. So how we got things going was I launched the 501c3, and then I got together with a bunch of different organizations in the region that had similar focus on research and education, and we sort of co-founded a network that we called the Environmental Monitoring and Management Alliance. And basically we pitched a couple of those of us who had projects in mind, pitched them to the group, and New York Phenology Project was one that they adopted. So it was great because we got a really fast start. I think similar to ADESA, it was kind of a quick thing that everybody said, yes, I could see the value of starting this project at my organization. You know, it's low cost, and as I'll mention again later, it's sort of a big bang for the brand buck. In other words, an organization can get a phenology project going pretty quickly, easily, cheaply, and then basically say that they are involved with citizen science legitimately. So those organizations are hoping to kind of step into the next realm of community engagement, whether they be a nature center or so forth. This is a really great way to get that going. So we had some fast adoption, which I think in terms of building regional networks, that's a pretty key factor. The next year, I focused on creating a website and some do-it-yourself tools. All of that stuff is still in the works. And then I started to work with organizations basically as a consultant through the 501c3 to help them get started. So certain organizations really wanted a bit of a handhold. I mean, I think NPN puts everything out there on how to start a project, and it certainly can be done without any type of consultants or added person in the mix. But I have found that it's a pretty effective model for, certain site administrators that are, already have very overloaded job descriptions and don't feel like they have the time or the energy or the expertise to begin from scratch, and they want somebody to help get it off the ground for them. Give a lot of talks and workshops and conferences and so forth, and then began to even target certain regions and suggest the idea of starting networks similar to Emma. So for example, we recently onboarded 7 organizations all at once on Long Island based on a conference talk that I gave in Long Island, that I suggested Long Island was a really great place to actually start a network that did more than just phenology monitoring, but that would be a way to kind of organize them as a regional monitoring alliance for that landscape. So those are some of the methodologies. As you can see here, our map, that's a map right now of the current sites. We've recently added a few more to get in between that nice gap there between the Catskills region and the Adirondacks. And as you can see, there is that nice urban to rural gradient both from the south to the north, but then also from east to west across Long Island. And we've logged quite a lot of observations. There's 23 sites now. These numbers are estimates, mostly based from 2014. I haven't gotten final numbers for 2015, so I know that since more sites have been added, that each of these numbers is a more than at this point. But as you can see, it's mostly community volunteer observers, some college students, a fair amount of staff, because each site has a site administrator and usually 1 or 2 other staff that are doing the monitoring as well. A lot of the organizations are doing teacher training programs or having field trips and so forth. So there's a lot of activity in that regard. And then, of course, all the passive outreach based on the interpretive signs and articles and newsletters and so forth. I think I'll try to get to the website at the end. And if not, if I don't end up getting to it, feel free to visit. We have resources for if there are any people on the call here that are looking to start something, particularly on the East Coast. We've got a lot of East Coast plants with the pheno phases already marked out, and these sheets that you could just print out, laminate, and take right into the field to get going. So feel free. Those are all free resources to check out. The site diversity, I think, is probably what makes this project really robust and interesting. We've got a number of research institutions, nature centers, land trusts, 1 national park that's making a wildlife refuge, a botanical garden, recently just added a high school site, a couple of private land preserves, and then interestingly, we have a couple of faith organizations and a few more that have recently contacted us to discuss this idea further, because I think this idea of utilizing phenology monitoring, particularly for these monasteries. They're both a Zen monastery and a Tibetan monastery that are using the site for mindfulness training, which is pretty interesting. I would say the most common methods or the most common types of sites would be a phenology trail, and then also a pollinator or phenology garden. That's a pretty hot topic these days, and the kind of thing that on a school grounds, like for example at the New Falls Courtyard, that's where that new monitoring site is. It's a courtyard. It's not a forest. It's not a trail. So that's more of that kind of garden type of site. And then some examples and highlights. I mentioned the New Paltz student. His focus is to build this phenology monitoring site, get trained up, really learn how to use it, and then actually train the teachers at the school and have them be able to use it with their classes. So that's a pretty fun and unique way that a partner site got started. The mindfulness training I mentioned. And then Mohonk Preserve, that's been one of our star sites. First year they got going, they started out with more than 50 observers, it inputted 17,000 observations, and one really interesting thing happened where we found out at the end of the season that one of the volunteer observers worked with a group of disabled adults at a nearby organization, and he was bringing that group every week, and they were utilizing the trail as a skill building opportunity, and completely on their own. It wasn't organized by Mohonk, and so that's just a nice example of that kind of proliferation that's not having to be organized by the actual site itself, but that the community begins to use it in the ways that they particularly need to or want to. Another interesting thing that's happened is a nearby organization that is now a partner site. They discovered an old, historic data set from the 1800s that have a lot of the same species that we have now. It's a really interesting project. They basically discovered this data set, and it turns out that there had been a network in New York of phenology monitoring sites in the 1800s, which is just totally blows my mind. And they basically, we got together and started to talk about how we could work on this project together, and so I ran an analysis with my research assistant, Celia Cuomo, who also happens to be the site administrator at Mohonk Reserve, and we took a look at modern data and historical data, and were able to track changes over time. That basically the sort of preliminary analysis shows that it's about 2 weeks later. So that's pretty exciting. And then I mentioned that already about onboarding those sites. So we'll keep going. Okay, so the Long Island group, what gave me the sort of idea to target them was I just took a look at a map of a bunch of different preserves and places on Long Island, and just saw those kind of green dots across the island, and just thought this is a perfect place with all of these different parks and preserves and all that getting something going. It's a small enough region, you know, kind of it wouldn't be overwhelming, I think, for the groups to be able to get together, that type of thing. So for those of you that are thinking of, you know, maybe even starting a network, that's one thing that I think is that is key to getting something going, is, you know, that the region is not so huge, and that the locations are not so far apart that people can't get together, because I think that's a pretty important part of it, not just for, you know, one workshop where people are driving hours to get there, but, you know, over time, folks are going to want to meet regularly. With that Emma group up in the Hudson Valley, we meet quarterly, and that seems like a good amount of, you know, nobody has to drive really more than an hour or so to get to each other. So that, I think, is a kind of an important part if you're interested in starting more of a regional network. This is just an example of the graph from the historical data research project, and that was a really fun thing. And then back to Mohonk, I think one of the things that makes their project really successful is that the site administrators, they do a lot of potlucks and group trainings. They schedule meetups, and then showcase the data that the group has used. So this was you know, just a little snapshot that they had put together, looking at red maple flowering across the different sites, to show that, look, indeed we are seeing this sort of urban to rural gradient from New York City to the Catskills, and the timing of red maple bloom, and then just neat little tricks like this that show, okay, this is how much, you know, how many observations NPN made this year. This is how much the New York Phenology Project made, and then this is how much Mohonk made, and then this is what you contributed. You know, to give folks that idea, like Adessa mentioned before, that they're part of a larger project, and that's something that I think has really helped their project flourish. So to wrap up, a few of the unexpected learnings along the way. I think that having this site diversity with people utilizing the project for all of their various reasons, right? Like some people are really focused on the research part of it. Some people are really focused on the community part of it. Some people are focused on the education and being able to use it with teachers. And there's just this really large suite of reasons why people would start a site or participate as observers in a site. And I think in terms of building a network, that having that site diversity is really key. And then within, never mind the network, just within your partner site, to have diversity amongst observers and different utilizations of the site. So at Jamaica Bay, it's a pollinator garden, but it's also a phenology monitoring site. And within the site, there's observation stations for sensory and observation skill building for young students, and things like that. There's just a lot of different methodologies for the community to utilize your site. Again, like I said before, I think it's a really quick way to have your organization be part of this massive movement that is happening all across the world of citizen science. One thing I did find that was unexpected was that the potlucks and social events are just totally key to a project working really well. And then the consulting model was definitely a great way to get programs started. I think Odessa mentioned this before, that when you start up a project, it's best to begin the summer before. I remember starting the Portland project and starting it the winter before we launched, and had to get out every winter twig ID book in the library to be able to actually identify all of the plants for sure. And so doing it the summer before and actually tagging the plants and kind of getting your feet wet seems to be a really more efficient way to do it. And then definitely noticed across these various organizations that, some are more successful than others. So some organizations get started and their programs flourish, and some don't. And I think a big key to the program working are site administrators that are in some sort of long-term position, and that there's something within their job description that focused on citizen science activities, or better yet, even specifically around the phenology program. I think that really helps. Having the board be on board, having a little bit of funding to get going, of course, these type of things. People do it without any of that. I mean, you can really make do and start a project very, very lo-fi. But of course, having a little bit of funding through nice signs and all that really helps. Having a network, volunteer network already established helps. But it's not necessary, but that does seem to get the ball rolling. You can kind of plug in volunteers already associated with the organization. And then last but not least is to have your mowing regime in place before the program gets started. That's one of the things that's happened to almost every site. Probably, I don't know if that's true for anybody else, but things like common milkweed, or along the edge of your trail, the maintenance crews kind of whacking your plants down is one of those really strange things you never expect to have to deal with, but happens a lot. So anyway, yeah, feel free to contact me for questions, email, check out the New York Phenology Project website, and enjoy and good luck on your project.
Thanks, Carissa. That was a lot of great information. And I think actually what we'll do is we can chat everybody's websites into the chat box so people can have them and click on them that way. But what I wanted to just point out after your information, I thought it was great that there was a historical network kind of already there, since people have been observing phenology for a long time, and that kind of helped you really focus on some scientific research questions and also develop some interactions between the two, the different species that are there. So I think that's another thing to think about, and just also thinking about engaging people at your site and having social events available is a really great way to get people involved in the process. So thanks so much. I think that we have one more presenter, and it's Beth Bisson. I'm going to make her a presenter now for Signs of the Seasons. Let's see, I think I gave it over to you there, Beth.
Okay, can you see me?
Let's see. Yes, we can.
Okay.
You're all set.
Great. Hello, everybody. It's great to be able to join you today. My name is Beth Bisson. I'm the Associate Director of the Sea Grant Program, which is hosted by the University of Maine. We're one of a network of sort of like wet and salty extension programs that we focus on marine and coastal environments, and we're tightly linked with the Cooperative Extension Program in Maine, and there are 34 Sea Grant programs around the country. My colleague in Cooperative Extension, Esperanza Stanchoff, and I started the Signs of the Seasons program in 2010 through collaboration with a number of partners in Maine, and then in 2014 we expanded the program to New Hampshire as well. So we're now called New England Phenology Program, and we've been doing some work with other states in the Northeast as well, thinking about expanding farther. Our primary partners in Maine are the Maine Audubon Program, Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens, Schoodic Institute, which is a nonprofit associated with Acadia National Park, Maine Maritime Academy, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Maine. And so we work together with our partners and an advisory committee of researchers and educators in the state and region to develop the program and to do outreach and to host trainings, which we do about 11 times a year. And so we have a website as well. This is a screenshot of our website in our online volunteer interest form that we have up there. We typically do trainings in winter and early spring, but we also do them at different times as well. We have both terrestrial species and marine species that we observe in our network, but we've targeted our observations on a group of 19 species that our climate science advisors either are working on themselves or that they've selected as really of key importance for understanding climate better, and or are involved in some other larger type of campaign. So we've chosen them for those reasons, but we've also chosen things that are just very easy to identify and that occur in many areas of the country. I think we have 6 of the calibration plant species for NPN, and all of these except one of our marine seaweeds we're already in the database, and we've set up a different system for our algae monitoring because it's so important both commercially and ecologically here in Maine. So our observers, they run the gamut from 4-H youth and families to Master Gardeners program, which is a cooperative extension program that's all over the country, K-12 students and teachers, informal education organizations, public libraries, state and national parks, land trusts, environmental monitoring groups. But by far what's been interesting to us in the time that we've been doing this is that the people who, the largest number and often the most dedicated volunteers are just interested citizens who come to us through, we've done a lot of newspaper articles and op-eds, and we do climate seminars, and we present at Master Gardener gatherings and all kinds of land trust and education organization conferences that happen every year, environmental monitoring network conferences. And so those are our outreach mechanisms, but the largest number of people who come to us are citizens who hear about us, and many times through their friends and their own personal networks. Our trainings are 2.5 hours. They're usually in the afternoon or evening, which it seems to work best. And I'm just going to run through kind of the outline of what we do for training so that any of you who are interested in starting up can get a sense for what seems to have worked for us. We do introductions, and we start with a pre-survey just to kind of get a sense for where people are with understanding what phenology is and the linkages between phenology and climate. Then we do a hands-on phenology calendar activity, which I'll show you in a moment. And we do an overview of some of the very basic climate science and links with phenology and climate and why it's a good way to understand climate and local effects of climate change. We go through the objectives of our program and who our partners are, and then we do an overview of our target species and what the protocols are. We use all of the Nature's Notebook protocols and data sheets and everything so that our data are directly usable and comparable. And then we practice either inside or out in the field depending on the time of year. We force things like forsythia and maples and lilacs inside to bring to our trainings in jars so that people can have something to hold and look at with the data sheets if it's still snowy outside, or we go outside. We plan trainings for places where we can go outside and look at the species, and we kind of go and look at what's there in advance. We show the web resources available through both NPN and our own, and then we practice with Nature's Notebook database, which we found to be a really key thing to do, and that significantly increases our volunteer retention, because that has been the #1 challenge for many of our volunteers, is just feeling comfortable with online data entry. Even though I agree it's a very user-friendly tool, it can be daunting for people who haven't gone through it, and so we devote some time to that. And we do a post-survey and questions and answers. And then we follow up with emails with links and resources, and we do an annual evaluation survey of our volunteers. And then, like others have noted, some of the things that are most important just for keeping up the sense of community and that these observations are useful and used and needed are email updates on what folks are seeing, webinars. We do seminars with researchers and educators, and many other opportunities like that that we do through the year. So I'll just kind of give you some images visually of what we do. So this is a phenology calendar activity where we set up the months of the year and have folks write down things that they're seeing in their own backyards and communities. We really focus on sites that are personal and accessible to people because we want to build on that personal connection that people have with phenology, that it's something they know and they understand intuitively, and they may, in many cases, have been keeping journals up on their own for many years, but for them to understand that those observations are useful. And so we do this calendar activity, everyone writing down changes, phenophases that they associate with the different years, which is fun because they're never the same, and it always depends on who we have in the room. And then to highlight phenology and climate linkages, we use a number of different examples, which vary depending on the time of year. But many of our volunteers are gardeners, and so this map from the USDA of plant hardiness zones in Maine is really useful because it changes over time, and that change itself is really indicative of what we're looking at with climate change. But that the green there that you see along the coast and in southern Maine, this most recent update to the map, this is the first time that green has shown up. And so that sense of connection with those hardiness zones, or the number of frost-free days, really resonates with people. And also this is useful because you can see the different zones in Maine and how varied and north to south the state really is. And so it's nice because then when you use the data visualizations, you can see the changes north to south, as you were showing for New York. And then we go through some examples, studies through the Primac lab at Boston University of recataloging species that Thoreau had cataloged in the 1800s, talking about pollinators and crops. This is a picture of wild blueberry flower, which is critical to our state's economy and sort of iconic in the Northeast. And then historical examples, such as this image of lady slippers blossoming in this 1917, whereas you would never see it flowering that late anymore. And everyone has their own anecdotal observations of those things too. And then we just show some examples of the data that we've collected, and this is just gives people a sense that this is really a long-term endeavor, and that we have 5 years of data. These are the average time of initial dandelion growth in the spring for the 5 years that we've been running, and you can see those interannual variations, but just hammering home that point that variability is what we want to understand better, and that without longer term data sets we won't be able to see through all of that noise to understand what the trends are. We go through our protocol with an example for people to work through, and we use monarchs and robins and monarch eggs, and point people to resources like this Journey North recording of of robin calls, so that they can use all of these things in their own backyards as they're trying to figure out which species they're going to observe. And then we go through the data sheets and have folks fill in all the different, according to what was in the example. We have identified a few places that are sticking points where there's a lot of questions about different phenophases and what it means, and so we have prepared a bunch of example slides like this for breaking leaf buds that can help folks work through that confusion. And then there's another example for increasing leaf size. We get a lot of questions about that. And then, of course, the hands-on practice, inside or outside, as I mentioned. I'm sorry, it's not, there we go. So then this is just images of our advisory committee, researchers and scientists and educators from all over the state, and then we have some folks in New Hampshire too who, I'm sorry, aren't on this list. But they are very, very helpful too. If we have questions, we can send images from our volunteers to them to clarify, and they're very engaged in the program. We typically meet with them in person once a year. So we go through the online database with a volunteer. If there's somebody willing to set up their own site live using a web connection, that's very nice, because then we can answer questions as they come up. If not, we just show them one of our sites online. But we really go through the whole thing, showing how to set up a site, how to report observations, and submit them. And then we show some of the data visualization tools. So here's an example of all of our signs of the season sites in Maine and New Hampshire. And then run through some of the research campaigns that we've been participating in with monarchs and milkweed. The New England Leaf Out Project is another example. The Green Wave campaign from the last couple years in the Northeast, looking at spring breaking leaf buds through the National Phenology Network. And then we post new events and opportunities on our website, so you can see this webinar is on there for today. Then we'll be doing a year-end summary in October, and we have a number of other, current news and phenology articles that we try to keep current on our website. This is what these are some of our species that folks are observing, and you can see that the very easily identified and readily accessible species are the ones that are observed most frequently. And then the frogs are actually probably artificially low there because we just added them last year. And so overall, we just try to focus on the fact that citizen science is really the only way that these data can be collected in such large numbers, and really sharing with folks how important it is, how critical that their observations are captured, because we could never pay enough graduate students to do all of this wonderful work that they do. And so I will leave it there.
Great, thanks, Beth. That was a great overview of what you guys usually include in your training, and it sounds really like important to note that I like the way that you really kind of make it personal to the folks that are participating in the workshops, so that they can really understand what some of the changes mean for them and what they might see. And also, just having done a number of trainings, it seems like you know where your observers usually get stuck, so that you're able to develop some resources for them and make it a little bit easier, so that that people can really see what they're doing. So great, thank you.
Thanks.
And we are just about out of time. My goodness, what is my screen doing? There we go. So I just wanted to open it up for questions. I don't know if anybody has any questions they want to ask some of these folks while we're here. It seems like there are a couple that were typed in. Let's see. Looks like Tracy has a few questions. So she says, does it have to be in New Hampshire? I think in order to participate in the Signs of the Seasons program, it needs to be in either New Hampshire or in Maine. And so if you go onto their website, there'll be some more details about that. And they do have some estuary or marine sites. Really the limitation is the species that we have in our database, but some of them are marine species, so those are available. Let's see, what else? Anybody else have any questions they want to ask? Go ahead and type them in. I'll give you a minute. It looks like, Tracy, do you have a question about Maryland? She says, do you know any Maryland sites? We do have some sites in Maryland. You could certainly start your own if you're in Maryland. But on our partners website, maybe Erin can chat that link in the chat box to everybody. You can see where there are groups that are already established. So if you're near any of those groups, whether you're in Maryland or anywhere across the United States, you might want to check out where they are and figure out if there's something that you can participate in before starting your own. So that's something to do. We do have a bunch of resources on our website about getting started that I showed you in the beginning, and those will be available. I'll send you the slide deck, and we'll post it on the webinar page, which you see there. And you will also have an access to the recording of this webinar. So that'll be available to you. I think we did a great job, you guys, highlighting everything. I think with Edessa talking about the way that she set up the sites and organized the groups. And then Edessa or Carissa taking it a little bit further and talking about collaboration around the science projects. And then Beth and Esperanza in Maine giving a great overview of some of the elements of the training that they've come up with over the years. So thanks to our presenters and our partners for putting that all together. And what I have on the screen now is we have one more webinar that's coming up in October, on October 6th. And this is our annual year-end summary, so we will provide you with some information on what our data, your data, were telling us over the years. So feel free to register for that if you want. And again, we'll record that just like anything else. And lastly, here's my contact information. If you have any questions about getting set up or you need a link to something on the website, please feel free to email me, and we can certainly get you what you need. So I hope it was helpful. Yes, it looks like some people are saying thank you very much. This was very helpful, so I'm glad that was helpful to you all. And we hope to see you or hear from you again soon. Thanks for participating.